Hello and welcome to week 5 of this Open SAP course. In the previous weeks, you created your first Fiori app and enhanced it with a number of features. The topic this week is SAP Fiori extensibility, meaning how customers can extend SAP's standard apps. This first unit is an introduction to Fiori extensibility with SAP UI5. We're going to cover the scenarios for extensibility and the features SAP UI5 has to offer. So in this unit, we're going to focus on the UI and in another unit discuss the extension of a data service. So let's start by explaining what extensibility means. Here you have an example of a Fiori application. It is showing quotations. And if a customer or a partner wants to use that app, often the customer would like to change the app, to extend the app. It is not very likely that the customer use the Fiori app as it has been delivered by SAP, but wants to do some changes. For example, adding a new field to this detail screen here. Another example would be to hide some controls which are not relevant in the specific customer's scenario. Or the customer might want to add a new function, to add some new functionality which has not been delivered by SAP. Here's another example. This is a timesheet approval application. Again, you can see here some screen elements where you might want to hide some controls, add additional labels on the screen, and put in some customer-specific functionality. And from talking to many customers, partners, and also consultants, for example, we learned that practically all customers extend the SAP standard delivery. So what does it mean for us? Of course, we need to provide tools to support the scenarios and concepts and mechanisms to support that on all the different levels, on the UI and on the data section of the applications. So it's a very important scenario and it affects the application from end to end. You can see here the different application layers. It starts from the UI layer. This is everything dealing with SAP UI5. So you would, if you want to do an extension, you would want to touch the UI layer, assuming that you have some backend logic for your extension. For example, if you do want to add a new field, you have the new field in your backend and you just need to expose that to the UI to make it visually, to make it appear on the UI. Another layer which might need to be touched is the gateway layer. So if you have the data available in your backend system, but it's not yet exposed via a gateway service to the Fiori application, you would need to change something, make an extension to the gateway service. Next layer would be the business suite, that is the application layer. So here you're usually in an ABAP system and you might want to add a custom field to that. So you would need to touch ABAP. You might want to add a field to a database table in ABAP and do some business, add some business logic to that layer. And in SAP HANA, you have a similar situation. If you want, for example, to have a completely new field, you would want to change the HANA data models and all the related things necessary for that. You have another table here on this slide which is giving you information on which skills you would need on the different levels. And as you can see here, depending on whether you're doing a change in the UI or in the business suite, it's different programming languages, different skills you would need for that. For example, for the UI layer, it's good to understand, of course, SAP UI5, OData, JavaScript, HTML, and you could make use of your specific knowledge for UI development. If you want to touch the backend system, the gateway service or the business suite itself, of course ABAP is a skill you would need. So you can see here extensibility covers many different layers and quite some skills are needed to do that. And of course SAP needs to provide tools to support this, and with the SAP Web IDE you have several tools, integrated tools to work on the extensibility scenario. And you also have in Web IDE, you also have visual tools for extensibility, so you can get pretty far doing extensions without the necessity to actually touch coding and understand the individual coding. But we'll see that a bit later. So how do we do Fiori extensibility with SAP UI5? Focusing on the UI layer, we assume that I'm a customer and I want to add a specific field to my application. For example, to my business object, to my sales order header or sales order line items. And what options do I have? I could modify the standard SAP coding. Obviously this is not what I want, because if I modify standard coding, I would have problems if SAP provides a new support package or new release. I then would have to merge my changes with SAP's delivery, and that's not what I want. The other extreme for that is I copy the full application. Then it's easy, I can do all the changes in the code, but by copying, I'm losing connection to the SAP standard application. So if SAP provides new functionality, my extended app still has the old status what I initially copied. So this is also something which I don't want to do. So what I want is to have a concept and mechanisms that I keep SAP standard unchanged, not do any modifications, but enable that my custom extensions would survive future standard deliveries. And also that my extension app can benefit from future upgrades and support packages. That's the intention of this concept of the SAP UI5 extensibility concept. And let's see how would I know which are the parts, the pieces in the Fiori application which I can extend. There is the SAP Fiori Apps reference library, and that was mentioned earlier in this course. It also contains specific information on the extension points, the areas in Fiori application where you can put in some extensions. So let's have a look. This is the Fiori Apps reference library, and let's assume I want to extend a purchase order approval app. So let's search for that. I search for purchase, and this is my approve purchase order app. I get a number of information, and I also have a section here on the implementation information. And here specifically important is the extensibility section of that. And you can see here you have the technical name of the application. It is stored in the SAP UI5 ABAP repository. You can see here it says BSP. That's a bit misleading, so it's not a business server page based application. It's just the database tables where Fiori apps are stored in an ABAP system. With that we can use transport mechanism or node support and get all the functionality which exists for BSP. But it's not a BSP application. And then here you see the extension points which are available in that specific application. You can see the different views for the master and the detail screen, and the different areas of the applications, for example, where you can add additional fields. And here you also have controller extensions, so it's not just the UI elements which you can extend, but also the controller behavior. For example, if you want to do searches or change the initialization of a controller to, for example, fill your own fields, then you can use that. So lots of information and documentation is provided here. So let's go back to my slide and see what are the concepts in SAP UI5 to handle that, to handle the standard application versus the custom application. You can see here on the left is SAP standard application with the standard coding, and we want to leave that untouched. On the right, we have an extension project. We're going to create this extension project with SAP Web IDE. The extension project contains only your extensions, nothing else. It's not a copy, it contains only the delta to the SAP standard delivery. And you can see here the component.js file defines the component, the extension project being a component, an application, and there are 3 different sections in there. One is to declare the component, meaning to define the extension project. Second one is to load the standard application, because when executing the extension project, we want to load the standard application and leave the functionality untouched. And then as a third aspect, we do the extensions. On top of that, we want to execute the extension we have defined. So let's look at that a bit more in detail. You can see here the component.js file. At the top, you see the declare statement where the component of the custom application is being declared. You can see here the load of the parent application, because we need that to execute the extension project. And in the lower section here, you can see the extensions. You can see the specific area here called customizing. This is where the extensions will be defined. Currently it's empty, and as we do extensions, for example in Web IDE, you can see here that coding is being generated here. The term customizing is a bit misleading. It has nothing to do with like IMG, for example. It is where the extensions are being defined. So let's have a look from a different perspective. You can see here on the left the SAP standard application and how it's being visualized in the workspace of the SAP Web IDE. You can see there's a component.js file, as I mentioned earlier. On the right side, you see the extended custom application. And the first thing you see, it's smaller, and that's the idea. It just contains of very few files which are necessary to run the application. There's no real business content in it, at least not yet. And it has a component.js file, and that file is loading the parent application. And on top of that parent application, we define some extensions in the area here at the bottom of the file. This is where new files, new fields are being defined, or controls are being hidden, and all the changes are being defined here. So this is the last slide to explain the concepts in SAP UI5. As you know, SAP UI5 structures its applications with the model view controller concept. So first thing is you have a data model. We talk about the data model and extending the data model in another unit of this course. And we have the view implemented as an XML view layout. and we have a controller implemented in JavaScript, and the controller is handling all the data binding, data flow between the views and the data model. So, and as we concentrate here on extensions in the UI, we can see what is possible for the view layout, for example. We have view extensions. So just like in ABAP with customer extensions, we also in the view have defined extension points where you can put in your coding. You've seen these in the documentation, or you can see the extension points in the tools we provide in SAP Web IDE. So predefined extension points where you can put in your custom coding. Second option is a view modification. So it's not really a modification, because the whole point here is that we are not modifying SAP standard, but we are changing it. There are certain properties for UI5 controls which you can change. For example, the visibility. Here you can change, set the visibility to false, and then certain UI elements will disappear at runtime. And the third option is the view replacement. If you think that the view extensions, the extension points are not sufficient for your use case, or that hiding controls is also not sufficient because you want to completely change the layout of that view, you can do a view replacement, meaning you keep the whole application, and just for this single view you want to replace that, take out the SAP standard and put in your own custom view where you can do whatever you need. These are changes on the view layout side, and also on the controller side changes are possible. So we have controller extensions hooks where you can add some coding, JavaScript coding, to actually execute what is necessary for your extensions. For example, if you have new functions, a new button which needs an event handler, you can add JavaScript coding for that here. You can also override standard functions here, for example, to initialize your data which is needed for your extension. So this is a short summary of the extensibility features in UI5, and in the next sections, in the next units, we'll see how you can work with this in SAP Web IDE. Thank you for your attention. Hello and welcome to the second unit of the Fiori extensibility topic. In the previous unit, we introduced you to the extensibility features offered by the SAP UI5 technology. We now want to have a closer look on how SAP Web IDE supports you with the implementation of extensions. You will notice that the tools guide you through the required steps and help you to concentrate on your business scenario. So, let's start by quickly repeating the main idea of the previous unit. Imagine that you have an idea for a Fiori business scenario you want to implement with a Fiori application, and as you know, you can create a new application for that Fiori application based on a template, or if you think that an existing standard application comes very close to what you have in mind, you can also use extensibility features to extend the standard application. And for me, it's always helpful to keep in mind where things are physically stored. So for example, in the extensibility scenario, you have the parent project, that is the standard original SAP application. You have that stored, for example, either in the ABAP system or on SAP HANA Cloud Platform. And that application remains untouched. We do not modify that. And when we create an extension project for that, that is being created in the SAP Web IDE workspace. And once you run the application, Of course, it's pulling the original application from either the ABAP system or HANA Cloud Platform and adds the extensions on top. How does that look like in the workspace? You see in Web IDE on the left you see the standard application, the parent application. It has the usual files for the views, for example. Once you extend that, you're getting an extension project that is quite small. It just contains a basic frame and the extensions you implement on top of the parent application. At runtime, it's pulling the original application and using that. And have a bit more closer look on how this looks like in the coding. We've already had a closer look in the previous unit on the component.js file. That is the file which contains the individual extensions you're making. For example, on the lower left here, you see a screenshot of an approval app. If you, for example, want to hide a button, there's a share button here at the bottom right. If you want to hide that, you can do that with Web IDE, and the result is the lines here in the component.js. You can see that in a specific view, it's here the purchase order details view, and there's a button share, and that is just, you can see here that the visibility is set to false, and that's everything what is needed to hide that button. So these are the basics. And now finally, how do we work in Web IDE with extensions? So first, we need to create the extension project. And the normal scenario, as I've mentioned before, is we want to refer to a remote app. So the parent app is a remote app. Remote means in an ABAP backend system or HANA Cloud Platform. And that's what the usual scenario is, because we want to leave that untouched, not modify that. The second option is to refer to the workspace. That is what we want to do here in this course, because we want to avoid complexity with regard to using backend systems, so that you can concentrate on the actual extension mechanism which we deal with here. So what we are going to do is use the Fiori reference app. We talked about that them last week. With the sample app mechanism, we can import them into the workspace of Web IDE and use them as the original standard app. So all the features are the same. The only difference is that the app is physically in your workspace and not, for example, in an ABAP backend system. So let's see how this works in Web IDE. You can see here my workspace, and I have the 3 sample apps, the Fiori reference apps, already in my workspace. So the first option is we create an extension project, just to show you how that works with the remote parent. So we have the 2 options, ABAP repository or HANA Cloud Platform. Let's choose the ABAP repository here. And again, we have to select which backend system do we use, in this case the GM6 system. And now it's checking and listing all the Fiori applications, all the SAP UI5 applications stored in GM6. And in this case, we want to look at a purchase order approval app, because what I have in mind is very similar to the standard app. So if I'm filtering this list for PO, and you can see here one of the results is the standard approve purchase orders app. I click OK, and the system suggests a name for my extension project. It's the same as the standard project plus extension here. And I'll have also options to import the parent application, which is exactly what I do not want to do now. I want to leave it in the remote backend system. Next, and finish. And it takes a second, and you can see that a new project has been created. and you can see it's only a very few files. And if we have a look at the component.js file, you can see that it loads the standard purchase order approval app, and then there will be some extensions stored in this place here in the file. So this is an example with a remote parent application, and for the sake of simplicity here in this course we're going to use the sample apps. So this purchase order approval app will play the role of my standard app. The steps are basically the same. With new extension project, I refer to a parent in my workspace, and here I can see again my workspace. I pick the purchase order approval app as my parent, click OK. Same thing, the name is suggested. I click on Next and Finish. And you can see here another extension project has been created. If I open that, you see the same files. And now let's see what happens if I run that project. In this case, I want to run it with mock data. You know that the reference apps, the Fiori reference apps, come with mock data. And again, I want to avoid using a backend system in this scenario now. So I run this with mock data. The preview screen opens. Now it's pulling the original app, and you can see I have the full app. It is showing the mock data and is running currently without extensions. So my idea is now to add some extensions. This is a purchase order approval scenario. So somewhere here in the detail screen, I want to add a message that the user can please approve the purchase order before month end. So I want to add a text here. So how would I do that? Let's go back to the slide and see the different options for that. We have two options. One is extensibility with wizards, and the second one is use a visual editor. So first one is a wizard. You can see here, just like the other wizards in Web IDE, it guides you through the necessary steps. And with the wizard you can create an extension project. We've just seen that. You can hide a control, you can extend a view, you can replace a view, extend a controller, all the different options we've seen before. So let's do that in Web IDE. I select my extension project and I now want to add an extension to it. I choose New Extension, which is being generated into the extension project. Yes, this is my extension project, that's correct. And now I have the different options. In my first example, I want to extend a view. So in the detail screen, I want to add something and I want to make use of an extension point implemented in UI5. Click on Next. I choose the view I want to extend. That is the purchase order details view. And it gives me here the available extension points. You can see here there's two. One is after the object header in the upper area, and there's one after the form. There's a form in the detail screen a bit in the middle area. So I just pick the first one, click on Next and Finish. And what happened? Just to see where this came from, I just opened the original app and see the view in the original app. There's the detail view, And you can see here in the detail view, SAP has provided an extension point. That is the extension point after object header. And we're going to put in some logic into this extension point. So again, I'm closing the standard app, and in the extension app, we have in the component.js files, we have now a couple of lines here which reflect the extension. There has been a fragment being added, which is then being at runtime loaded into that place. And if we check the view folder here, you can see a new file has been created. This is for this extension point, and currently it's empty. So let me add something here. I want to just give out a text. Object attribute, and I just enter a text. Please approve before month end. That's it. So just a single line here. I save that, and I'll switch to the preview, refresh the preview. You can see here currently there's no text. I refresh the preview, and now we have the text here in the screen. It's not properly formatted yet, but just by adding a single line, you have implemented the extension point. So this is how you do it with the wizard. Let's now go back to the slide and see how this can be done with the visual editor. This is the second option. We have the extensibility pane. And as you can see here, it looks very similar to the preview. It has two modes. It has a preview mode, then it behaves just like the preview screen. You can click through your application and navigate to the respective screen area where you want to do some change. Once you're there, you toggle to the extensibility mode, and then the behavior is changed. The buttons, for example, are not working in a normal mode, but now you can select individual screen elements. You can select them and extend them. Let's have a look at this a bit more in detail. You can see here there's the preview screen. On the right you have an outline view. You can see the hierarchical structure of all the UI elements. You can see the extension points, which objects can be extended or which objects already have been extended by you. You can toggle that here on top of the screen. You can also do the extensions here then either with the right mouse click or with the options given here at the bottom of the screen. So you can implement, for example, extension points and also navigate to the respective coding, and then the code editor opens. So let's have a look. I now want to implement a simple extension hiding a button. So let's see how that works with the extensibility pane. You can open that here, Tools, Extensibility pane, and in my case I want to open that with mock data. You can see here, you can see on the right the structure of UI elements. You can see the application here, and as I'm in preview mode, you can see that here I can in a normal way navigate through my different screen areas. So let's assume I have now reached the screen area. This is the share button I want to remove. It does not make sense in my scenario. Now I toggle here to the extensibility mode, and you can already see by hovering the mouse it selects the different screen elements, and I now move the mouse to the share button. You can see it's selected on the right, and I can, for example, with the right mouse choose an option to hide this control. I click that, I get a message that the control has been hidden. Do you want to refresh the application? Yes. Let's see what happens. Currently the button is there. And if I refresh, you can see the button is hidden. Let's implement a second extension here with that editor. You can see here, let me select the elements which can be extended, show extensible elements, and you can see here the two extension points. There's one extension after object header that already has been extended. I did that before with the wizard, but there's another one, extension after form. So that is somewhere here below. There's a form here on the detail screen, and there's another extension point here. So let me implement that. I can use, for example, the selection down here, the possible extensions, extend view, OK. The extension point has been extended. And now I can also from here navigate to the respective coding. Again, in the background, this page fragment has been created. I go to code, extension code. I want to implement that. The extensibility pane closes. You can see here in the workspace a second fragment has been created, and currently it's empty. And I can just in the same way implement that and put just some simple text to the screen. I save that and can go back to my preview screen, refresh that, wait a second, and here you can see the second text is also implemented, this time with a visual extensibility pane. Let's go back for my last slide. So what we've seen before now, two ways to actually implement extensions, and you've seen the extension points which are available. There's lots of documentation for the Fiori apps to help you, to support you which extension points are available and how you can make use of them. What is always possible here is that you do extensions just by working on the code. So if you have the feeling that SAP does not provide extension points in the right place where you need them, or you have the feeling that the extensibility pane or the wizard does not offer enough functionality for you, you can always work in the code. That's a general principle in Web IDE. If the functionality is not yet sufficient, you can just in the plain, easy way work with the code. You can create folders, you can create files, work with the editors, and adapt the application to your needs according to what SAP UI5 offers, or whatever you want to implement. So you're not limited to what the tools or wizards offer at the moment. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Hello and welcome to Unit 3 of Week 5 on advanced topics of UI extensibility. In this unit we want to have a closer look at the other extensions like view replacements and controller extensions. We also want to finalize our extension project by moving it into its runtime environment. Let's start with the overview of the SAP UI5 extension features you already know. This is a slide showing you the different extension features of UI5. We've seen that in a previous unit. You see the model view controller parts of a UI5 view. You see the XML view layout. You can see the data model, which we're going to handle in the next unit. And you see the controller implemented in JavaScript. And for the view and for the controller, you see the possible extension options, the view extensions, meaning implementing an extension point, the view modifications, for example, changing the visibility of a UI element, and the view replacement, which we're going to cover in this unit. And for the controller extension, which we are also going to look at now. This is a picture to visualize that you can handle the different parts of a UI5 view separately. So if you have the standard SAP app, you use Web IDE to build your custom app. And the standard SAP app consists of the view, the data model, and the controller, and each can be extended individually. So if it is only a visual thing you want to extend, then you extend the view or you replace the view. If it's the controller, so you need some different behavior of your view, you would extend the JavaScript controller. And if changes to the data model are necessary, of course, you would need to enhance the data model. But each of the extensions can work separately. So you only touch those elements which you actually need to change, and the rest remains unchanged, unmodified. So let's now have a closer look at more extensions, in this case the replace view extension. So far we looked at hiding a control, for example. You see a screenshot here on the left. There are individual UI elements. We looked at the button before. The same is valid for a label, an input field, any UI element. And you can hide that. Another option here, you can see here at the bottom, is the view extensions, implementing extension points by adding a couple of UI fields and predefined slots in the extension points. We can do that. But what happens if this is not sufficient? You do not want to add or remove single files, but you want to have really a completely new view. So here in this case, you have a form in this view. What happens if you want to have a table instead? Or a graphic, some analytics, completely different thing. In this case, you would rather replace the whole view. So then you use the view or controller replacement, meaning replacing the view layout in XML, or the controller logic implemented in JavaScript. And that affects the full view. Let's have a look how you do that in Web IDE. This is the extension project I created in the previous unit. This is the extension of the purchase order approval. In this case, let me just start that so we can again see the application. I run this with mock data. And what you see is the list of purchase orders on the left, which will come up in a second, and the detail of the purchase order on the right. And what I want now to do is to add an additional button. So here in this case, top of the list, I want to add a button so that this list shows only some purchase order, only the pending purchase orders of the last week, for example. So I want to add a button here and also an event handler to react if the user clicks on the button. So I want to put an icon here. So first I have to select an icon. How do I do that? There's an icon explorer of UI5 which is giving you all the icons. You can see here there are categories of icons. You can also use the search feature. And I know my icon has something to do with time, so I'm selecting the time category here, and I can see there's an icon pending, which is the one I want to use. Okay, now let's do an extension and use that icon. I select my extension project and open the extensibility pane with mock data. Now I want to have a look at the list on the left. So in the outline view, I choose all elements which can be extended, and I can see here there's the view S2 purchase order. That's the master list on the left. And I want to replace that, assuming that I want to do some bigger changes to it. And with the right mouse, I see the different options I have. I can replace that with an empty view if I want to start from scratch. In my case, I want to start with a copy of the parent view. I choose that. And I get a message that the view has been replaced by a custom view. Okay, now I need to put in some coding. I have the option, for example down here, to go to the extension code so I can implement the button. You can see here in my workspace an additional file has been created, and the content is a copy of the original view. So what I'm going to do now here is in the header section, where we already have a button to select, to switch on the multi-selection option, I want to add another button. I put in the button and have to fill in the icon. I use an SAP icon, and that is the pending icon I've selected earlier. And if I tap on the button, I want to execute a function named pending. That's it. I put the button on the view layout with this line. I save the coding, switch to the preview and click the refresh button. Currently there's just the multi-selection button here, and if I refresh, we should see the new button. You can see here, there's the new button. It's here. That's the new button. We have the icon we've selected, and if I click on the button, nothing happens because it has just been added to the view layout. We can see it, but now we want to add an event handler to actually execute some logic for it. So to do that, we want to extend the controller. Again, I select the extension project. This time I'm not using the visual editor, but the wizard. I create a new extension. Yes, this is the correct extension project. And I want to extend the controller in this time. Extend controller, next. And I have to select which controller to extend. I know that's the S2 controller for the list of purchase orders. I select that, and here I can choose I want to replace that with an empty controller, and in this case I just want to copy the parent controller and do some changes there. I choose next and finish. And you can see here another file has been created, which is my custom controller implementation. So let's keep everything as it is and just add the function for my button, for my new button. So the function is called pending. And that function, just for simplicity now, should just raise an alert. Of course, here you would put in your logic to work on the list of purchase orders. So let's just give an alert here. You clicked on the pending button. Okay. What does the editor tell me here? There's a red marker here at the front. If I hover with the mouse, I can see it's saying there's a missing semicolon. Okay, I must not forget that. Put semicolon here, and the marker changes to yellow. Okay, let's accept that. Seems good. I save the coding, and let's see what happens in the preview. Again, I click the refresh. And you can see we have the new button, and now if I click on it, you can see there's a message from the browser. You clicked on the pending button. And now I would go on and implement the necessary business logic. So this was implementing a view replacement and also a controller replacement. Let's go back to the slide to see another extension, another possible extension. Just again an overview to see which files correspond to which extension. We've seen the component.js file before. You've seen the coding to hide the control. To extend the view, we've seen that as well, where a new fragment is being created. And that creates a new XML file here marked in light blue to implement your the view extension, the view extension, yeah. Or if we replace a view, that's what we just did. In the same way, there's a new file with the XML view layout for the custom view. And what we did just before this slide was extending a controller. And also for this, there is a new file which contains the custom controller code in JavaScript. So what other option we have? We talked about the view and the controller. There's also texts, language-dependent texts, which appear in the application. And if we want to change those texts, the customer wants to put in some individual text, change the terminology, or, for example, add another language, this is the place to do that. So the language-dependent texts are implemented in property files. You can see there's a list of text here with a key and the text itself. And for each language, there's one file. There's one file containing all the English text, one file containing all the French text, and so on. So for the extension, it's also possible to extend those texts. So again, just like before, we have an SAP standard text definition, and if we extend these, a copy of those is being put into the extension project, and they can be changed. And the advantage is that the text usage in a view, so the individual places where those texts or labels are being used in a view, that remains unchanged. So the key of the text remains unchanged. It's just that in the extension project it's getting overwritten, so to speak. So let's do that in Web IDE. Again, I select my extension project, create a new extension. That's the correct project. And this time I select the I18N resource text customization. I18N is for internationalization, resource text customization. Next and finish. And you can see what happened here is there's a new folder named I18N. And in here there are properties. You can see those are the texts in English, and you have a fallback also for text if if the application is used in a language and there's no property file for that language. So we have the texts here, and let's see what do we want to change. For example, there's a placeholder text here in the search field. It currently says search. So just let's change that text. That is somewhere here. Let's use the search functionality, Control F to find that. I search for search. And you can see here there's a text, search placeholder, and currently it is search. So let's just enhance that search for purchase orders. So we changed the purchase orders. We changed the text. We can also create new property files for different languages, for example. I'm saving that. Again, going to the preview, refreshing that. And you can see here it now says search for purchase orders. So a simple way to also change the language-dependent texts of an application. And just let's have a short look what happened while we did all those extensions in the component.js file. You can see here there are the two fragments for the view extensions. They have been created. We have the button share visibility set to false, and we have down here the view replacement and the controller replacement, all contained in the component.js file. Good, so let's go to my last slide. We're done with our extensions. The custom application is working fine, and now as a last step we would want to deploy that into its runtime environment. So just like in previous units where you created a new application, you would now deploy the custom application to either the HANA Cloud Platform or to the ABAP backend. So it's a new application which is referring to the parent application and adds custom extensions on top of that. And with that mechanism, we achieve the goals we had at the beginning. So we keep SAP Standard App unchanged, and if SAP delivers more support packages or more additional versions in the future, our custom app would benefit from them. That's it for this unit. Thank you for your attention. Hello and welcome to Unit 4 of Week 5 on the topic of data extensibility. After learning how to extend the UI of a Fiori application, we now want to have a look at the required changes to the data model. We will see how you can extend a data service with a new field, for example. Let's again have a quick look at the different layers of a Fiori application. Here you can see again the different layers, specifically the UI layer and the gateway layer with the business suite underneath. So for performance reasons, usually a Fiori application uses a single data service. So if we want to extend the Fiori application with an additional field, for example, we would also want to extend the underlying OData service. And by that, using SAP Gateway to extend the respective service. So let's have a closer look at the OData service. So just like what we've learned for the UI, also for the service, we can redefine a gateway service, and with that make use of the standard service, of the standard data, and on top add, for example, a specific file and fill that with custom data. So you can see here how the data model is structured, and there's an SAP delivered OData project, and a custom OData project, which refers to the original SAP project. And within the custom project, you can, for example, add custom entities to your OData model or add properties to existing entities. So this is to visualize the different layers. On top you have the UI layer, the consumption layer, that is the Fiori application using the service. You have the service model of the OData with the definition of the data model, and you have the provisioning side, meaning that is the implementation of the service within Gateway and within your business logic in the respective data tables, for example, in your business suite. And those two parts can be handled separately. The definition of the data model is the interface between the two, and this is used from the UI, and it is used to define the data service. And for example, it is possible that you develop the UI, the UI5 application, even though the gateway service is not yet defined. And we'll see in this unit how you can do that. The main idea is that those two are decoupled, not only from the software, but also from the development process. So it's possible to develop a UI, for example, a prototype, even though there is not yet a developer working on the gateway service. This is a visualization of the definition of the data model. So within Eclipse, Gateway offers tools to define the data model in a graphical way, or in the SAP GUI, there's the Gateway Service Builder available to work on the data model and redefine an existing data model, for example, to add a new field. So let's quickly have a quick look on how that works. We assume that we're having a sales order tracking application, and the sales order tracking application is displaying a list of sales orders, given the details of the sales orders and the status. And we would like to enhance this application with an additional field. But how do we know which gateway service is used for the application? We can find out by using the Fiori apps reference library. So let's have a look. We've seen that before when we looked at the different documentation for extensibility. So let's filter that list to find the sales order tracking application. This is it, track sales order, and I have the section here on implementation information. We've looked at that in a previous unit. Here is the section on extensibility information, for example, with the extension points. What is also available here is a link to the extensibility documentation. Let's have a look what's contained in there. You can see here, specifically for the sales order tracking app, you have information for front-end and back-end extensibility. For example, here you can see that the gateway entity used is a specific service here. It's the SO tracking service. That's the service used in this application, and that's the service we would need to enhance. Now, let's have a look. This is the gateway service used in these units, the GM6 system, and I want to start now the SEGW transaction, that is the gateway service builder. And to enhance the service, I'm creating a new project here, and that project, I'll call that Z sales order tracking extension, give it a description. And I create the project. So the project is here and the data model currently is empty. Of course, I want to refer to the existing data model. And for this, I redefine an existing OData service. I use redefine OData service. And here I can select the respective service. And here is the service for the sales order tracking. It is version 1 I want to extend. The next screen, I can see all the entities of that service. Let's assume we want to take all of those entities. And I click on Finish. And I can now see that here I have the respective entities in my new custom project. And for example, for sales orders, I can see all the properties for sales orders. And here I can just now add a property specifically for this extension. I can append a property here. Let's assume I'll add a status field to the sales order. Call it status ext. It has a type, string, a couple of other properties like the field length, and a label, status extension, and also a field name. That's it. And I can now use this generate button here to generate the respective data structures and ABAP coding for that. Here you can see it's a number of classes being generated and they are inheriting from the standard classes. What you can see here, down here, is a section on the service extension. There's an option to override the base service. What does this mean? So if I don't flag this, it means that an additional service is being created. So I have the standard service and I have a new one which is extended with a new field. This means I have two services, and I would also need to change the UI, the Fiori application, because it's now another service which should be used. If I select this field here, I override the existing service. That means I'm not creating an additional service URL, but I'm using the existing one. But internally, it uses the new data model and gives data for the new field. What does this mean for the Fiori application? Let's again have a short look here on my slide. On the top, you can see the OData client, that is the Fiori application using a gateway service. You can see the gateway server with the respective URL used in that application, and in the standard there's a base service here, and in the backend system that is implemented by a certain service which is providing the data. And if I extend that, it's another service and also another URL from the gateway server. So we would need to change the Fiori application. We still have the old service available with the original data. The other option is that we have a single service URL. So we have the same URL, but now after extending, it's not using the original backend service, but the new extended one. The advantage is that there's no change in the Fiori application necessary. It's still using the same URL. So that was a quick look at how you can change a gateway service and how to add, for example, a field to an existing standard gateway service. If we use the option that we create a new service, I mentioned that we need to change the Fiori application and make it point to the new service. How can we do that? That is also supported by SAP Web IDE, if you remember the selection of all the different extensions you can create, there's also one called Replace Service. If you choose that, you replace that with a new service, and the effect is not only that there's a respective entry in the component.js file and the new service is used, but also that the definition of the data model is changed. So in each project there's a metadata XML file, and that contains the structure of the data model with its entities and properties. And if you replace the service, then also the content of this file is being changed. So this is how you deal with changes to the OData service. If you assume that the change of the OData service did not yet happen, maybe it's another developer working on that, how could you still proceed developing your Fiori application or extending your Fiori application, but not having to rely on a backend service which is available? That is possible. Just as we did in the past, you can work with the local mock data, also if you change the data model. For this, in SAP Web IDE, we offer an OData model editor. Currently, this is a text-based editor, and that helps you defining your OData model. This editor has specific features to work with the OData model file. For example, it has code completion to help you with that, and it has validation features to check whether the syntax and the content of the data structure is correct. So the idea is that we change the model definition, and also for example, for a new field, can edit some mock data, put in mock data, and then run the application. So the application can be executed. You could show it to the end user, get feedback to it, see the mock data, all of this without having real back-end access. How do you do that in Web IDE? So we have a specific OData model editor, as I mentioned before, with a couple of features to support that. And the result is a modified data model which you can use in your extension app, or which you can also use to create a new app. If you create a new app, you can, instead of selecting a gateway service, you can also select that file and create a new app based on a template and based on your new data model. So let's have a look in SAP Web IDE. First, I need to enable the OData model editor. The OData model editor was developed by the Gateway team, and here in Web IDE, if you select Tools, External Plugins, you can see a number of plugins which were provided by other teams within SAP, so not coming from the core Web IDE development team. And here you can see, for example, the OData model editor. I want to enable that. Click OK. Now I have to refresh the Web IDE because an additional plugin needs to be loaded into Web IDE. Okay, it should be available now. So let's have a look. This is our extension project, and we have the metadata XML file here. And if we want to edit that, we can now open it with the OData model editor. So with the right mouse, select Open with OData model editor. You can see here the data structure, and I now want to enhance that. You can see here there is a number of properties here, for example the purchase order ID, and I'm now going to add another one. I start typing, and I can see the type ahead to define a property. I give it a name, let's say status extension, I give it a type. Let's see which types are available. I use Control Space and I get a list of types which are available here. To keep it simple, I choose the string type, and that's it. Let's see what other code completion features are offered. For example, here, if you see the property ref pointing to a property, I can also place the cursor here, press Control Space, and I can see other properties of this data model. There's also validation functionality you can see here to support changes to the data model. So I added the field. I can save the data structure. Now I want to put in some data, because if I test run the application, I want to see some data. I use the mock data editor for that. I open that. I can see the different entities in my data model, and specifically I worked on the purchase order entity. And you can see here there's an additional column in my data model. You can see the mock data we've seen in the previous units, and I can now just enter some mock data which makes sense for my end users. So a status might be approved, draft, new, okay, I filled the mock data, click OK, and now it's stored in the local data model files, in the local data files. So I've extended the data model, entered some mock data, and now I just want to make sure that the new field appears on the UI. So looking at the application here, I want to have the new field here in this list somewhere. So let's open the view layout for that. This is a view we replaced, so we have the view layout here. And I just put that here in this section and add an object attribute, text, and do a data binding to the new field. Slash close, and that's it. So I added it to the individual items of the list on the left, and I just need to add the new field also here to this list so that the actual data is being pulled from the data model. Okay, let's save that. And in the preview, again, I click refresh. There's some error in my application. Let me quickly check. Oh, I missed the curly braces here. That's it. Again, save and refresh. And you can see here the application as we had before, but now we have the new status field here with values like approved, draft, new, and all of this working locally. No backend call, no gateway service involved so far. That's it for this unit. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello and welcome to Unit 5 in Week 5 of Build Your Own Fiori App in the Cloud. This week we are talking mainly about extensibility. And in this session I want to talk with you about a topic highly related to extensibility, which is mobile extensibility and a new offering from SAP called the Hybrid Application Toolkit. We all know that Fiori, as a set of applications, can run on any device. Fiori can run perfectly on a desktop computer. It runs very nicely on tablet, similar to the way it runs on desktop, and it also runs perfectly on mobile devices. The screen might look slightly different when we run Fiori on mobile, tablet, and desktop, but the functionality is always the same. We talked about responsive design. We talked about responsive tables. So the nice idea is out of the box, Fiori can run on any screen size and on any device. But in many cases, I don't necessarily want to have the exact same experience on different devices. There are certain things that I might be able to do on a mobile device that are impossible on a desktop. On mobile device, I have all kind of extra functionality. I know the location of the mobile device. I have a camera in almost any smartphone today. I have my contact list. I have my emails. I have the ability to access data from other applications. Sometimes when I'm using my mobile device, I'm not connected, or I'm occasionally connected, and I might want to have an offline capability and be able to work even if I'm in an area without good cellular coverage. And one of the things that we are all familiar with, and either hate or love, is the ability to get notification. The mobile phone always tells me what is happening. I keep on getting alerts, something that is less common on the desktop. So why won't I have all those features also as part of my Fiori applications? So if I have an application in which I need to get a barcode, well, I can use the camera for that. If I have an application in which I need to send information to someone, I might want to access my contact list. In many applications, I want to have geolocation. So this functionality might complement many Fiori applications. And for that, we need to have the ability to add mobile-specific functionality to an existing Fiori applications. Now, when we look at mobilizing Fiori, there are different levels for that. As I mentioned, out of the box, Fiori, using SAP NetWeaver Gateway and our front-end server, is capable of running on any device. But if we want to run it on a mobile device, we might want to have additional functionality, but we might want also to have some additional performance features. And with Fiori today, we have a set of additional offering. One of them is called the SAP Fiori Client application that enables me to improve the performance of Fiori on a mobile device and get some extra features. We have another set of offering, which is a combination of the Fiori client with additional APIs, and that enables me to actually enhance the functionality of a Fiori application running on a mobile device. And I will try to explain those different offerings in the next few slides. So the first thing I mentioned was the Fiori client application. Why do we need something like that? The Fiori client application is available on the Apple Store. You can download the application from there or from the Google Store, and you can run it on either Android or iOS device. And that application improves the performance of Fiori. How do we achieve that? When we run in a browser on a mobile device, we don't have full control on the way that the browser is caching the information. So in many times, we need to do extra round trips between the application and NetWeaver Gateway in order to fetch the information over and over again. The Fiori client acts like a browser or an enhancement that improves the performance by caching the information on the mobile device. So the first time I actually run the application, I need to fetch all the data from the backend. But on subsequent calls, in most cases, I'll be able to get the information from the cache and save the round trip to the backend, and by that, actually improving the performance. Since I'm able to run a Fiori application inside a client that I control, I can also handle some other limitations that happens on a mobile device, not only performance. One of the limitations is how do I handle attachment. If I open an attachment in a Fiori application on a mobile device, it will replace the screen, or it will appear in a full screen, and I might have problems going back to the application. I want to be able to access the device capabilities like the camera, and I want to have a better security when I'm running on a mobile device. So out of the box, the Fiori client provides some of this functionality. It provides me with an improved caching. It provides me with improved attachment handling. It provides me with improved viewer for some of the attachments. And it also provides with an out-of-the-box connector to some of the device features, like the camera, like persistency, offline persistency, like the contact list. Not all the features of every device are available with the Fiori client, and if I do want to get additional features, I might need to develop them on my own. The Fiori client applications is based on Apache Cordova and Capsule. Apache Cordova is a set of device API that enables mobile developers to access the mobile functionality, the same set of functionality that I mentioned before. And this is an open source offering, and anyone can use that, and many companies are using the Cordova API to actually create mobile applications. SAP enhanced the functionality of Cordova by creating a set of SAP-specific plugins. Those plugins enables us to connect with SAP mobile platform, to connect with SAP backend system, as well as to do many other activities that are required by SAP applications. So we're looking at the Capsule as a set of plugins that provide the enterprise capabilities to Apache Cordova and enrich the functionality that Cordova provides out of the box. Now, the Fiori client is based on those specific API, the Cordova out-of-the-box API with some of the Capsule plugins. But you can also create your own client. You can create your own Cordova application that is using those APIs with the Capsule extensions, replacing the standard Fiori client if you need additional functionality. And in order to achieve that, we provide today a tool called the Hybrid Application Toolkit, which is part of the Web IDE. Now, we are not going to cover all the functionality of the Hybrid Application Toolkit in the scope of this course because it requires some additional context and some additional knowledge that is beyond the scope here. But in the future, we are planning to provide a dedicated session specifically on this tool. But since it's already available on the Web IDE and each and every one of you can actually create those type of applications, if you want to try it, you are more than welcome. And I try to explain briefly what this toolkit provides you in addition to what you have today in the Web IDE. So first of all, this toolkit provides a connectivity between the Web IDE and my Cordova development environment. The Cordova development environment and the APIs are not available on the cloud today, so I need to install them on my own personal computer. But in order to use them from the Web IDE, I need a way to connect the Web IDE with those API that I have on-premise on my computer. So the Hybrid Application Toolkit provides a connector to my local build environment. It provides me with a plugin for the Web IDE that guides me through the process of developing hybrid application. And it also provides me with a companion Cordova application that I can use to test what I'm creating. When I start to work with the Hybrid Application Toolkit, it's similar to any other development project with the Web IDE, no different than the project you created for the Fiori. We have a template similar to the Fiori templates, one for a standard Capsule application and one for a master detail Capsule application. They are very similar to what you have with the Fiori, but they provide the connectivity to the Capsule and the needed functionality that can enrich the application with mobile capabilities. Once I choose this type of project, I need to make sure that I connect securely to the Cordova API. Because it's not a good idea to have two sets of APIs or two systems, one calling a remote API without actually identifying myself that I'm allowed to use that API and this is the correct API. So the first step is actually create an API key that enable me to securely call and use the Cordova APIs that I have on my on-premise system. Once I have that, I can start and build my application. And one of the things that the Web IDE plugins for as part of the Hybrid Application Toolkit provide is the ability to choose which device capability I want to use. I can use the standard out-of-the-box Cordova plugins, and then I have something like a compass, device information, geolocation, a whole list of out-of-the-box device-specific capabilities that Cordova provides. I can also pick any capsule plugin that exists today, or I can even enhance it in any way. And once I choose the capsule, I will see a list of plugins that are more appropriate for the creation of enterprise applications. And of course, I can use the camera, I can use the contact list, I can use my geolocation and GPS. All those plugins are now available for me in my Web IDE development environment to actually consume the information coming from the device itself and inject that into my application, whether it's a UI5 application or, of course, a Fiori application. Some additional functionalities that the Hybrid Toolkit provide as part of the assistive development capabilities of the Web IDE is actually the ability to do code completion. We know that we can do it with control space when we use the Web IDE, but all the code that is Cordova specific and capsule specific is now also a part of this assistive development mechanism. We have a layout editor. What you see is what you get editor as part of the Web IDE. And now also the controls that are required for the development of mobile applications that are enriched with Cordova and capsule plugins are now part of this layout editor. So you can actually drag and drop user control. And in many cases, many mobile applications can be developed with very, very little code by just using the layout editor. And of course, I need to try and test it. So we have an emulator. We can emulate an Android device. We can emulate an iOS device. And then you can actually run the application not inside the standard test harness of the Web IDE, but in a test environment that is more appropriate for testing mobile functionality. After I'm actually testing that, and I can use the out-of-the-box companion app that is part of the toolkit to actually wrap the application with something that is more of a mobile application and test the functionality I want to have. I can deploy it back to my Cordova development environment. So I can, from the Web IDE, send my application and download it to my local machine, and then I can actually inject the Cordova API and use the Cordova API as part of my project. So I can create the integration between what I created in the Web IDE and what's available to me in the Cordova development environment on my computer. And I'm now actually creating that specific application. And once I finish this process, I can go and try the application, which is now complete with mobile functionality as well as the UI5 functionality that I created in the Web IDE. I can now test this application either in an emulator or send it to a mobile device and actually see it in action. The last thing that I need to remember is that if I really want to deploy this application, I'm not going to deploy to the HANA Cloud Platform. I'm not going to deploy it necessarily to the Launchpad. I might want to deploy it directly to a mobile device because it can be a real mobile application that can run perfectly on a mobile device. And in order to do that, one of the options I have is actually to convert this application from the Web IDE into a mobile application, and then I can sign that application and upload that through SAP Mobile Secure management system into the mobile place. The mobile place is SAP Application Store, and once I actually sign the application and put it in the mobile place, you can download that directly to your mobile device and use it like any other mobile application. So with the Hybrid Application Toolkit, you can use the Web IDE in the cloud together with a Cordova development environment that you have on your own personal computer to create native mobile application or to extend an existing Fiori application with functionality that can enrich the application when running in a mobile device. You will hear a lot about this toolkit in the future once we have more and more functionality embedded into that together with SAP HANA Cloud Platform mobile services. And I suggest that from time to time you check how this toolkit evolves because it can really help you create amazing mobile applications. Thank you.